There is a hard truth about how most of us work that doesn't get talked about very often. We all carry patterns with us into our work. Some of them serve us well, and others quietly work against us, especially in moments where the pressure is just high enough that we fall back on instinct instead of intention. The challenge is not that these harmful patterns exist. The challenge is that other people often notice them long before we do, and yet almost no one feels comfortable pointing them out directly. So nothing gets said, nothing gets corrected, and the same behavior shows up again and again, shaping how we are experienced whether we realize it or not. Over time, this starts to look less like an occasional misstep and more like a defining trait. Not because of one large mistake, but because of many small ones that feel completely reasonable in the moment. Today, I want to explore a different way to think about Copilot. Most of the conversation around Copilot focuses on speed, faster emails, quicker summaries, and more efficient output. If you have listened to recent episodes, you may have already started using it for deeper thinking and strategy work. All of that is useful, but it only captures a portion of what is possible. There is another opportunity that is just as practical and in many cases more meaningful, using Copilot as a private coach. Not something that works for you in the moment, but something that helps you think more clearly before and after the moment. And for context, I'm Annie Rind, and you're listening to 1001 Business Problems Solved with Microsoft Teams. Each week, I try to bring you one practical idea you can actually use, without adding complexity. If you picture your career like managing a piece of land, it becomes easier to see why this matters. Some of us spend our time trying to grow things. Whether it's farming or gardening, we focus on planting more, producing more, improving yield, and making the most of the strengths we already have. But if the soil has underlying issues, if there is erosion happening, or something slowly draining nutrients, then no matter how much effort we put into growth, part of that effort is constantly being lost. What Copilot allows you to do is step back and look at the ground itself. Not just what you are trying to grow, but what might be quietly limiting how well it can grow. For me, one of those self-limiting patterns has always been overteaching. When someone describes a problem, my instinct is to explain what I see. I want to clarify, expand, and connect the dots as quickly as possible. It feels helpful in the moment, and in some ways it is. But over time, I began to notice that it carries a cost. It can overwhelm people, interrupt their own thinking, or lead us toward a solution that feels complete before we have fully understood the problem. The pattern itself is not obvious while it is happening. It only becomes visible when you step back and look at it more deliberately. This is where Copilot becomes useful in a very different way. Instead of asking it to help me respond faster or sound more polished, I ask it to take on a more critical role. I treat it less like an assistant and more like a steady, objective observer, something that can look at my approach and gently point out where I may be moving too quickly, explaining too much, or stepping in before it is truly necessary. Because that interaction happens in private, it becomes much easier to be honest. There is no need to defend the moment or justify the decision because it's just you and Copilot. You can simply look at it and ask what might have been done differently. Sometimes that reflection is simple. You might revisit a conversation and notice where you answered a question that could have led to deeper understanding if it had been left open a bit longer. Other times, it involves reshaping how you would approach a similar situation in the future, replacing explanation with a well-timed question. In many cases, the value comes from something even simpler, a small pause, just enough space to consider how a more patient or more deliberate version of yourself would respond. Because Copilot and I have been focusing on reducing this tendency to overteach, I find that I'm more confident in meetings. Rather than jumping in to explain, teach, or try to be immediately helpful, I first ask myself, do I really need to say anything at all here? And more often than I would have expected, the answer is no. I would have preferred to learn that earlier, but learning it now is still valuable, and it shows up immediately in how the conversation unfolds. As these patterns become more visible and more manageable, something interesting begins to happen. You stop losing energy to the same small mistakes. The erosion slows down, and the effort you put in starts to hold. And once that happens, you can shift the conversation from reducing downside to expanding upside. Every person has strengths that, when applied in a focused and intentional way, create results that feel disproportionate to the effort involved. The challenge is that those strengths rarely compound when they are surrounded by noise or offset by avoidable habits. When you begin to manage the downside more effectively, those strengths have room to show up more consistently. You can choose where to apply them rather than relying on them to compensate for other gaps. This is where Copilot continues to play a role, not by telling you what your strengths are, but by helping you stay aligned with how you want to use them and reinforcing the patterns that support that direction. So the process becomes both simple and deliberate. You begin by identifying one pattern that tends to work against you and start managing it with intention. As that stabilizes, you shift your attention to a strength you want to use more consistently, allowing it to grow without being diluted by old habits. If there is one idea to carry forward, it is this. Copilot is not only a tool for getting work done faster or building better plans. It can also serve as a quiet, reliable way to see your own patterns more clearly and make small adjustments before those patterns continue to show up in front of other people. And in many cases, that private correction is far more valuable than waiting for those patterns to be noticed, repeated, and misunderstood. Because at that point, you are not just improving your output. You are improving how you show up, and that is where the real leverage begins. If this was helpful, I'd appreciate a quick rating or a review so more people can find the show. And if you'd like more of this kind of thinking, subscribing is the easiest way to make sure it shows up for you each week. Until next Monday, this is Annie signing off.